Ready. Play.
Lerner Tien against Joao Fonseca is one of the ties of the round in Miami. For Damien, is it one of the matches that you're most excited about or not?
I mean, there's always some good history whenever these two play. Obviously, part of that was already 2023, that season in the Junior Slams, especially the U.S. Open final. But of course, later they wrote even more with the next gen finals. But considering we've already seen this matchup plenty, I'm like, I'm fine. I'm gonna watch it probably, but it's not gonna be something that's like, oh yeah. I mean, I have to just like, well, it's Miami, so I'm not gonna have to like set up an alarm for it or something like that. But you know what I mean. I'm not gonna lose sleep over it, but I'll probably watch it. Yeah.
So the three clashes that you sort of touched on there, the US Open Junior final of 2023, and then the two clashes that they had in the round robin stage, and then the final of the next gen finals at the back end of last year, all went the way of Joao Fonseca. So does Fonseca own Teen, so to speak?
Not really. I mean, sort of, because in a way, like Fonseca plays exactly the way that Tien would like his opponent to play, as in like, attack and miss potentially a lot, just kind of like force them into overplaying. That's what Lerner is trying to do, right? Just make his opponents look worse. And well, for the most part, it hasn't worked out. Lerner did beat him in the juniors, but not in the US Open final, of course. And I think what we saw at the next gen finals was just that, like, in the patches where Fonseca is hitting well, there's not that much for Tien to do. And of course, especially the group stage match was pretty, the first two sets, bagels. But well, the final could have gone. There was one set to love for Tien, right? And then there's a set point, I think, in the second set for a two set to love lead, which is very hard to recover in the fast four format. It could have been worse, definitely from his perspective. So I think in a way he kind of has to be just hoping that Fonseca, well, has a bad day or is like coaxed into errors, let's say. But yeah, in terms of his kind of like matchup from Lerner's perspective, it's a survival effort.
Mm. Of course, Lerner's had a couple of notable wins this year. He beat Medvedev, didn't he, in Australia, and he beat Zverev in Acapulco. So that may suggest that he's also growing on perhaps a similar trajectory to Zhao. Of course, Zhao has won an ATP title and also added a challenger title to his resume last week in Phoenix with a very competitive field there. So it does still feel as though Zhao is maybe one step ahead of Lerner. What about patterns of play? You talked about Lerner maybe enjoying playing a super aggressive player such as Zhao and then waiting for them to make the mistake as he tends to defend so well. Is that the general pattern of play, or is there anything else that's been quite interesting regarding the dynamic of their previous meetings?
Probably not. I mean, we've seen some very aggressive players just adapt against Lerner, and I don't think Fonseca has ever done that. I think for the most part, he's just like come out and tried to blast him off the court in their matches. The US Open final, he drops the first set, and after that, it's like a ridiculous display of hitting just crazy low margin shots, and that's how he wins it. The next gen finals, again, I think obviously he lost the set both times, but the moments when he was stronger than Lerner, like he just capitalized on that and he just played his usual game. Of course, Lerner is a lefty. He will keep him in that backhand corner a bit. We'll see how the like serve effectiveness is, perhaps on the Miami court. Well, actually, next gen finals or Miami, I don't think it makes that big a deal. I guess that big a difference. I think in at the next gen finals in Jeddah, of course, Lerner was like really troubling to guys like Fils or Menchik, and not necessarily to someone like Fonseca in terms of that lefty serve out wide. So no, I mean Fonseca has always just tried to play his usual game against Lerner. So far, it's been enough, but most of the time, there's at least that one set, there's at least that one poor patch when the errors are flowing. Obviously Tien is excellent and just like, yeah, counter punching and being able to stay in the points, being able to well, not necessarily when he has to generate on his own, but when he can just feed off the opponent, he is pretty amazing. So yeah, I think it's just a matchup where they both try to use their strengths really. Where actually maybe that's only true for Fonseca, but Tien as well. I mean, he just tries to hunt for the same advantages he does against the other players. It just hasn't really worked out in the last 3 meetings.
Since that Buenos Aires title, there have been a couple of bumps in the road for Joao Fonseca. Rio with an early exit there where he seemed to be racked with nerves against Muller, the pressure of playing at home. Then, of course, losing to Jack Draper. And at the time, it felt like humiliating would be too strong, but certainly a bit of a rough loss, getting bageled in the second set. But perhaps that result aged. Did you think anything particular at the time? Were you a little bit surprised about how one-sided that match turned out to be, or were you not really dwelling on it too much? And then, of course, he's recovered pretty well since by winning that challenger in Phoenix last week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it has to look better in hindsight. Like just watching that match, it was clear Fonseca was playing that match like he had one brain cell, because like that's sometimes how his game looks. He just comes out, blasts the ball, and against Draper it wasn't enough. Like the only game plan he had for this match was to smash his forehand and to potentially win like that. And well, in the windy conditions against someone who was defending this well, who was this fast, who was putting the ball in all sorts of uncomfortable spots, also serving so well, yeah, it just wasn't going to work out. That's why I think there's this very funny like correlation there that Fonseca hits 23 unforced errors, I think, in the opening set, and yet I think he was actually very consistent in that set in
Okay.
10 games, because that's the sort of hitting that Draper was like requiring from him if he wanted to basically execute whatever he was trying to do on the court that day, which is, yeah, I mean, just blast the ball and then hit it as hard as he possibly can, which, to be fair, is his game plan most of the time, and I don't think that should like necessarily change all that much. But yeah, of course, this is just a kind of like another learning experience. He and his team have to figure out ways to beat guys like that. Tien, in a way, there's some similarities to Draper there, but of course, the weapons that he's going to be facing, they aren't quite as big, and yeah, the ability to respond and I guess just put that pressure on isn't really the same. But yeah, it feels very weird to talk about bumps in the road when he's 20-4 for the year.
With Lerner, by the way, because I think we've spoken extensively about Zhao over the last 6 months in particular regarding his strengths and weaknesses and what he's capable of on a tennis court. Lerner, we have, of course, we've touched on him a few occasions, particularly in Australia, but perhaps our audience don't know him quite as well. Strengths and weaknesses. Well, I think let's maybe dwell on the sort of things that maybe he either doesn't have, could have, or maybe never will have. And you mentioned weapons there. Is that something that maybe Lerner is always going to lack, or what are his strengths and weaknesses?
I mean, well, that's a question that could be answered in like 20 minutes, but yeah, I mean, I do think to a certain degree that's something he's always gonna lack. I mean, if you're not like kind of like born with this natural ability to just get hit through the ball and make bigger cuts, you're probably never gonna get it. But I do think obviously he can be offensive when like the opportunity presents itself, and he does have decent pop for his size. Always had it. It's just not very natural for him to dictate, to generate pace. Then you've got him involved in all these chess matches with like Medvedev, for example, and when he's playing someone like that, that's good. But then again, he struggles against, I don't know, Navone recently, right? He lost to, simply because that's an opponent who's like not scared of going with him into this like long game, and someone who's not going to be scared of basically playing a 30-shot rally against him. Almost lost to Camilo Carabelli at the Australian Open just before Medvedev, for example. The lack of a potent serve is probably going to hurt him, depending on the conditions too. Obviously in Jeddah it was pretty good when like the slider out wide is working great. Yeah, that these conditions fine, but like on clay that's probably not going to be any sort of a factor. In general, when like he cannot use the pop from the surface. The shots don't really have that much traction on them. So it's definitely a unique style in a way. And I do think this is a little limiting to him so far in the sense that he is very matchup reliant, but also some of these big matchups, Medvedev's fair, he's done very well at. So,
And Medvedev and Zverev are pretty different, right? I was just thinking that. I mean, you say matchup reliant. I'm not denying it, but there's difference.
Sort of. I mean, don't they fit though into that like whole tall counter puncher vibe? And Zverev, you can also just get him into that 30 shot rally, make him hit all the forehands in the world. And in a way, for Lerner Tien, maybe it's not that different if he's playing Medvedev with Zverev. I mean, it is because it's the other. Well, no, actually, maybe it's not even that. He has a great slice too, which both the forehands of Medvedev and Zverev struggle with. Definitely great hands, obviously, but yeah, there are still questions regarding like whether you can win 7 matches in a row at a big event like this, whether you can regularly beat every single guy at the top, whether there won't be players like, for example, Fonseca, who just like come out and blast him off the court, which seems very much like the possibility. Although we have already seen Lerner handle so many different types of players too, and so many powerful players. Some of them who tried to introduce some of that kind of like extra trait in their games for that particular day. For Lerner last year on the Challenger circuit, nobody could handle him in in the States. I don't know, even someone like Tristan Boyer suddenly tries slicing and making Lerner inject more pace, and he was still losing. In the end, I guess in Champagne, Aidan McHugh did it well. Was really just like mixing up his net approaches with just constant slicing and forcing Lerner into longer rallies, which sounds unrealistic and like stupid, but actually that was the right thing to do. It's a wild set of abilities for sure. We don't really have that on the main tour right now. I mean, we obviously have Moutet, Gaston, and these guys, but it's a little different for sure. So I think it will be a fascinating game to like follow. And basically, I think I said it in a tweet like a month ago that basically anyone who Lerner Tien plays on the tour right now, it's a fascinating matchup because you don't really know until you see it how exactly it's going to work. So yeah, I think definitely you cannot complain about how he's been adapting to the main tour so far. Although some questions regarding like how far you can go with a game like that definitely remain. I think over the years we kind of learned that if you are very unique, probably at some point you're gonna run out of it in the sense that there will be like a set of stronger opponents who will know how to play against you. But yeah, for now, I mean, what more can you want? As you said, he is like a little behind Fonseca, maybe on the progress curve, but nonetheless around 60 in the world as well. After just 1 year ago being 500 or whatever.
For Lerner, is there something like a sort of a David Ferrer, or is there someone for him to sort of look to who's had a pretty stellar career, albeit not one which won a Grand Slam, or maybe there's an alternative player, certainly someone who's made the top 20 with that type of game, I think is very possible. Top 10, big titles, and then ultimately a Grand Slam is sort of the hope. But as you say, there's each one of those steps I think gets less realistic for every player, but just someone with Lerner's game.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we're just gonna be straight up wrong on this. Traditionally, it's not these kind of games that we see at the very top, at least winning big titles. But on the other hand, I mean, there are players like, I don't know, Diego Schwartzman, who made the top 10, and nobody would have ever predicted that. It's not always going to be the big hitting juniors. So maybe in the case of Lerner, it can actually be one of these more consistent juniors who usually, we don't really see them like progressing quite as well as someone like Fonseca, Shang, and the likes. But who knows? I mean, he's already doing so much more than most of these guys.
You mentioned the slice that Lerner can deploy. I'm guessing that Joao deals with that pretty well.
Probably. I mean, we'll see what the conditions are like. It should not be as windy as in the Californian desert. Well, the next gen finals, both appearances, that was indoors, which probably helps with that, but at the same time, I guess it must have made dealing with the Lerner serve a little more tricky, and just in general, his ball sliding more. So I don't know. It's tough to compare, I suppose, between the conditions, but I think you should be pretty fine handling the slice. Yeah.
Is one possible tactic for Joao, by the way, to just be a bit more patient, because you're going to get a chance at some point, when the rallies are evolving. I mean, or does that then take away that natural instinct a bit?
I guess that's the dilemma that most players like this face. I remember watching a Jerzy Janowicz match a couple of years ago and just thinking, like, this guy must not do like any tactical preparation before matches, because that would actually take away from him. He knows exactly what his strengths are, and he has to play it against every single opponent. And Fonseca for now is definitely like that. So I don't know if it's for the best or not. But yeah, maybe not the slice, but maybe like the height variation could be something that Tien can definitely look for here. But yeah, it feels like a matchup where he has to rely on Joao being just a bit of a mess, which he is on and
Sometimes.
off, I guess. Yeah. You wouldn't say that after Phoenix, right? But you would probably say that after the Indian Wells second round, that sometimes when the game plan doesn't work out, there's no plan B yet, which it will probably come much later in his career.
Sure. Okay, final question. Where on the scale of favorite is Joao Fonseca in this match? We've got slight, warm, heavy.
I think we have to go heavy, right? I mean, in Phoenix, for example, he was a big favorite in all of his matches, despite the stacked draw. So should he be like more of a favorite here than against someone like Bublik or Nishikori? Probably, albeit only slightly. Also, yeah, previous meetings that kind of, well, especially two. Let's say US Open, let's forget about it. Let's forget about the juniors. But the next gen finals, I think it kind of has to play into that. And yeah, it's just tough to find players against whom Fonseca wouldn't be the favorite right now. Basically, it's like the top 20, and after that, he's probably the favorite, which might be wrong. I mean, maybe people are just going a bit wild, but who knows? But yeah, I mean, if we're comparing that to how much of a favorite he was against guys like Nishikori or Bublik last week, I think has to be at least that. So pretty heavy.
That was great to hear that preview of the match between Lerner, Tien, and Joao Fonseca. And if you're wondering what this little thing is, well, let me tell you now, whether it be tea, coffee, or merely water, it tastes so much better from a talking tennis mug. And you know what? They can be yours if you wish to purchase one from our website. We've also got bags and stickers and hoodies and notebooks. Mira Andreeva. T-shirts as well, of course, coming in both black and white. And we've got a classic jumper for you as well, and many, many other things for you to purchase for excellent prices, so you can look like some of the coolest people on the tour. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.